once again. This is Nuance. Of course, I'm Mike Scala, and we're talking about Florida adventures, the things going on in the new year. Welcome to 2024. I am Mike Scala, like I said, joined by Timid, aka Jay Carter. He is the hip hop artist extraordinaire and the chair of BLM Tokyo, of course, co-host of Nuance. What's going on, Jay?
What's up? What's up? What's up? Happy New Year, one and all.
Yes, absolutely.
Akemashite omedeto. See, get
Ah,
Isaac right.
¿Qué más mérito?
All right. Not bad, not bad.
course, we have a special guest with us this week. We've got media specialist Isaac Asare, who's also here in Florida with us. What's going on, Isaac?
Greetings.
So, wanted to bring Isaac on because we have had some distinctly Southern experiences on the way down to Florida that I wanted to talk about. Interesting because we've done this trip a number of times, and I don't think we've ever really encountered this type of Southern culture on the way down and even in Florida until now. So I found that to be interesting. Maybe it's a coincidence, maybe it's a sign of the times. I'm not quite sure, but I could tell you in North Carolina, well, North Carolina is just kind of a funny one, but then in Georgia and also in Florida, we've had our experiences already.
Is it anything like the Southern experiences that we experienced in Florida?
Oh, well, that's a different bag of chips. Uh, yeah, no, thankfully, no. It wasn't anything.
What kind of experience was that?
The police
Yeah.
pulling us over, pulling everything out of the car, bringing the dogs out for no reason whatsoever.
Well, no good reason, right?
Right.
Yeah, in their mind, they had a reason, and you know,
Right.
you can certainly read between the lines there. What they told us was that the New York license plates was a thing, and they said they have a lot of experiences. I don't know if it's true or not, but they said people smuggling drugs from New York into Florida or whatever. Um, you know, I think it was a bit more than that.
Yeah, especially that town is known for that type of activity, that type of behavior. Those police there are known for that.
Yeah. But no,
So,
it wasn't anything of the sort. We'll start off with the lightest one, and knock on wood that we don't experience that, right?
okay.
In North Carolina, we went to a local spot trying to get breakfast and coffee. And it wasn't a Waffle House, you know, it wasn't one of the major chains, one of the major places that a lot of tourists might come to. It was really more of a spot that locals probably frequented, right?
Mm.
And it had a drive-through. And so we decided to check it out. But I pulled into the drive-through and I asked them, I said, "Do you guys have coffee?" And they completely did not understand what I said. So because of the accent, right? So I said coffee. They said, "Did you say give me a minute?" And I said, "No." I said, "Do you have coffee?" And they said, "Did you say do you want Pepsi?" And I said, "No." I said, "Do you have coffee?" And it went on. And so then eventually I had to change up the accent and I said, "Coffee. Do you have coffee?" And then they got it. And they were like, "Oh, no, 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 we don't serve coffee here." And so that was, I think, the first time I've been in the South where my New York accent caused me an issue. Someone just didn't understand me at all.
That's very, very weird. Yeah, I'm very surprised at that. I mean, you don't have it's not like a heavy New York
Right.
accent. You said coffee like a normal coffee, and even when you said coffee, it just that sounds more Boston.
I was trying to overcompensate at that point, but then I was joking. I was like, I should have leaned into the New Yorker, right? At that point, and when I didn't understand coffee, I should have said, "I said, do you have coffee?"
Right, right, right. I wonder if their speaker must have been bad quality or
I
something.
don't blame it on the speaker. I think it's because they didn't get the accent.
Okay.
Because I changed it up and I said coffee. I said coffee. They were like, "No, no, we don't have coffee."
Hot drink, beans, you know what I mean? Like, come
Yeah,
on.
yeah. It's just
All
funny.
right.
Now you're starting to feel almost like you're in another country, right? When you don't understand
Right.
each other's language. And so that was, you know, that was cute. That was just one experience. Then we went into Georgia, and this actually was kind of charming in its own way, also because the lady that we encountered in Georgia seemed really nice and wholesome, even though what she was saying, I think, was I won't say distinctly Southern, but certainly Southern flavored, right? Because this was the gas station attendant now at Georgia, but not the one who pumps gas. You know, you can pump your own gas. That's not like New Jersey. So, you know, we pumped our own gas. We went into the little store at the gas station to buy some snacks and drinks for the road. And the lady brought up politics, right? And she even said, she's like, I'm not a politician. And it was kind of random, I think it started because Isaac asked, how's your New Year's going so far, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it was one of these things where she's like, well, you know, so far so good, better than last year. And then she kind of went on her own tangent about, well, I'm no politician, but, you know, and I don't pretend I know all the answers either, but I've been paying attention lately and they really screwed up on COVID. And then she started going on and on about how the government didn't handle COVID correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So to tell you the truth, I'm not even sure what side that she fell on, right? I don't know if her view was the government didn't do enough, or if her view was the whole thing is a big conspiracy and you know, and COVID doesn't exist. I'm not sure where, you know, what she was getting at, but she definitely made a point, and we weren't talking about COVID, but she made a point to go there, right? A random conversation she had to go into, you know, COVID bad, basically.
Well, I think her whole point was overall things hasn't been better since COVID.
They have not been better.
They have not been better. Yeah. Because I asked how, her year was gone. And it's like, things, they dropped the ball on COVID. That's kind of how she started off.
Right. But how her year is going, the year is only 2 days old at that point. So
Yeah, but you know, if you say that over here right now in Japan, there's been a lot. Japan's not
Within
starting
the
off.
last 3 days.
Yeah, well, January 1st was a pretty major earthquake. January 2nd, there was an explosion and fire of an airplane at the airport in Tokyo. January 3rd, a major outdoor mall in one of the cities caught fire and went ablaze. So I'm curious what the news is going to be for today. It's like Japan needs to chill out. It's only 3 days in. Like you still got a lot to go. Pace yourself.
yeah, pace yourself, 24. Pace yourself.
Yeah, like what? So
But now you only know it's only up from there.
Yeah.
All the bad stuff's out the way.
well, you would have thought that after the earthquake on the first. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So I mean I mean, was one of you guys wearing a mask or something? I mean, like, cause
No.
for her to just randomly bring up COVID out of the blue, yeah, that's interesting.
I
Yeah.
think she was just saying things just haven't been better since COVID.
Right. But you also made a point to say that the government didn't do a good job with COVID.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
it was clear that that's what she meant.
Yeah. Yeah.
True, true.
But she seemed like a nice lady. You know, I'm not knocking her at all. But it was interesting. You know, we have this North Carolina experience, then we get to the gas station in Georgia, and they start complaining about COVID, and it's like, okay, I'm starting to feel like I'm in the South, right?
What about Florida? Anything happen?
Yes. So speaking of
Florida.
COVID, right? Yeah, Florida is going to Florida.
Right.
This is the most, I would say, distinctly Southern experience that we had, because for some context, my girlfriend has been sick and she thinks that she might have COVID. She's not sure. And she's back in New York. So she took some COVID tests, I guess, that were inconclusive. I don't know if the tests were expired and didn't really have a conclusive result. So she asked me to take a COVID test. Now, I'm not feeling sick, and I last saw her, I think, 5 days ago now. So I most likely don't have it, but just to be safe and maybe to see if that's where she could have gotten it. She wanted me to take it as well. So I've tried to get my hands on a COVID test since getting down here. And first CVS I went into, they said they were all out. Then I think we went to a second CVS, also didn't have it. Isaac calls a library, I think, to see if they had one, and he got some pushback, right?
Yeah, they're pretty much they're like, yeah, we don't have it. Like, I don't think you're gonna get it around here, basically. Like they were shocked that I actually called to ask. And I
Why
guess
would
a
you go to
little
the
bit of
library?
background. Like I guess most where I'm from, like the Maryland, the DC area, you can get it at the local library. So I
Uh-huh.
called the library just to see if they had extras, and they're like, "No, we don't carry it." And I don't think I know anyone that has it. Basically, is what they said.
Right. They basically said you're not going to find a COVID test around here because we don't really think COVID is a serious thing.
Right. You're not gonna find none of that nonsense around here, boy.
Yeah.
You've been practicing your Southern accent, huh?
Man, I grew up in the South too, so you know.
Oh, that's the southernness coming out of you, huh?
Yeah,
So
man.
it's not appropriation, as you're getting in touch with your roots.
Right, right. So did you find one?
We went to a few different
So
places and they basically laughed at us. So
yeah. So the second,
CVS should have it. I mean, you
went
would
to a
well,
few
the
think.
different
second,
CVSs.
the second CVS told me, come back on Friday. We should have some more.
Oh, so maybe
After,
they out.
if I did have it, I probably would be, gone already by then.
Right, right.
I don't think
Wow.
I have it because I don't have any symptoms. I know it's possible. Maybe I'm not feeling the symptoms of it, but like I said, my girlfriend is feeling sick, and so I think if she did catch it, it was from somewhere else. And luckily, I don't think I have it, right? Because I think I would have known by now.
5 days, nah, you would know by now. Unless you've picked it up from someone else between that time. But if the last time you had exposure to her was 5 days ago and you're not sick, then yeah, you probably don't have it.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the Florida experience so far. That's the southern, I should say, the entire southern experience we've had so far. Luckily, nothing really catastrophic, nothing like what we had to deal with, which is pretty bad. So let's keep it that way.
Yeah, man.
Hitting
Keep
up
it
the
that.
toilet later on.
Yeah. So
I got to say that this house that we're in is a very nice house here. Beautiful pool. There's a barbecue outside. If the weather is really nice this week, maybe we'll do some barbecuing. It's a really cool place to hang out. I definitely want to finish up the mixes. I've been saying that now is like I got space to do it. I think I should have the time now. I want to finalize the mixes of this album. Let's get this done. And this is the perfect environment, I think, to do it.
yeah. Isaac, you should have brought your camera. Y'all could have shot a video or something there.
I
Oh,
mean,
music video. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, see, man, you should have brought your camera. Look at you
You know,
just
I
dropping
haven't I
the
haven't done
ball.
any camera work in a while. It's
Well, why
been
don't you
what,
send me your
almost two
camera?
years.
Send me that camera. What was it? The what was it?
The
The
Black
black.
Magic.
Send it to me. You don't need it.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. Yeah. I mean, for a price.
I
Let's do some porn stars negotiating. Like, best I can do is $5.
I got 5 on it. Yeah.
All right. So, of course, thank everyone for tuning in and joining us in the chat. We were going to talk about New Year's resolutions. I think that was going to be the poll question. And so, while we're at
Yeah.
it, do we personally have any New Year's resolutions? We actually had this discussion, if you recall, Jay, last year on
Mm.
Nuance. And my thought at the time was, I try not to come up with resolutions just for the new year. I try instead to work on myself throughout the year. And it's something that I want to achieve. I don't put it off until the New Year's. I just try to do what I do throughout the year.
Right.
I will say I'll go last, but I do have a resolution this year, although it may just be the timing of it, right? Because it's something that I've been thinking about for a while. And now I'm thinking, yeah, you know what? One thing I would like to get better at is this, right? So I can call that a resolution because I'm thinking about it now. So in the meantime, do you guys have any resolutions?
Well, I think I mentioned last week. I wouldn't. I don't know if it's not a New Year's resolution because I started it about 2-3 weeks ago. But it's something I'm trying to keep up on. I noticed that my Japanese skills, especially reading, was starting to suffer. So um, I made a resolution that every day I was going to read at least 2 news articles in Japanese.
Oh,
And so far, I'm about 3 weeks in. I've kept up to that. And that's just to start so I can get that back. Because I started noticing when I'm looking at things, looking around, I'm like, kanji that I know I used to know,
and
having
that's Japanese
difficulty.
characters, right? Kanji.
Right, right. And having difficulty remembering what they mean or how to pronounce them. And so, looking or look at a wall like a document or look at something, and I still get that feeling like, this is going to be a pain in the butt looking at it. And it needs to be a little bit more natural. And so to do that, you got to have more uh, practice, reading experience and practice. So yeah, I made that resolution, I suppose, to start with reading at least 2 articles, news articles every day. So I've been on that.
Okay. And I
Yeah.
assume that you haven't given up on that one yet.
No, no, like I said, it's been about 3 weeks now, and every day have got it locked in. I'm on it. So
All right. Are you giving yourself credit for time served? So if you, let's say, stop it after the first week of December, will that count as a full year because you did 3 weeks of the previous year?
um no, I'll go through. Like I said, it wasn't really something I was like, oh, I'm gonna do this in the new
Yeah.
year because I started it before, but I mean, it's
Yeah.
something I'm
Fine.
gonna try to keep up.
Right. Right. All right.
So that's
Isaac, you
part of
got it?
Yeah, it's actually interesting how you do yours because that's kind of how I do mine. I'm a, big resolution guy. But then like before the year ends, I'm like, all right, next year I'm gonna do this, but then I'll start it early. So once the year starts, it's like a normal thing, and then I just continue to do it. But last year actually I went from, just doing resolutions to goals, pick like 3 major things I'm gonna do in a year. And luckily I was able to do it last year. This year I haven't said it yet, but then while here I'm gonna try to sit down and really think about what I want to accomplish this year, and then just write it down, and then knock it down this year.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I feel that. I've got a few projects I want to get I need to get done as well. So it's the same type of vibe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. For sure. It's funny how when the year turns, it sometimes kicks us into gear, right? Or it makes us think, oh man, I don't know if it reminds us of the fact that we're getting older or something, but we suddenly start to take notice of it, right? Oh, it's the new year, the change from 23 to 24. Like I better get this thing done. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of an arbitrary distinction, right? It's just any other new day. But for
Well,
some
I
Right.
think,
reason, it feels like heavier, right?
yeah, I think the pressure comes from reflecting on the year too, though, because like around
Right.
December, you start thinking like, what have I been doing all year?
Right.
And then you start to realize, okay, well, like I didn't do this, I didn't do that, and then you're like, all right, I gotta get it done, and that kind of pushes you through the year. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in that same vein, I was just thinking about and I was actually going to write a post about this because like you said, a lot of people do that. And I think people do that and we can get down on ourselves, be like, oh, well, I wanted to do this all year, but I didn't get to do it. And so then you start to get down on yourself about it. But maybe reflect on what you were able to accomplish throughout the year, to show at least to show yourself that you did do something, you did work on something, work towards some goals. And so I've been thinking about what it is that I did last year, that that I wanted to get done instead of what I didn't get done. So
Right. Right. But you wanted to get done instead of what you didn't get done.
r- right, what I was able to accomplish instead of what I wasn't able to accomplish. So
Okay.
focusing on the positive instead of focusing on the negative of what it was.
That's
So
important, right? I think
yeah,
people need to do more of that in their life. And you hear
right,
this kind of said as advice, right? People will sometimes say, oh, focus on what you do have, not what you don't have, and things like that.
right,
I think it's important that we do that because we do tend to always think in terms of goals. But when you do that, I think there is a slippery slope there where you could end up putting too much pressure on yourself or even being hard on yourself, getting down on yourself because you're setting all these goals, which comes with the implication of things you haven't yet done, like you said. And so
right,
be critical of yourself. Oh man, I haven't done all these things I wanted to do. And so it is important to think of how far you've come, right? And think
right,
about that. If you have certain goals you want to achieve this year, well, there's a good chance that means you were able to do things in the prior years to put yourself in a position to get those things done this year. And so maybe be
right.
grateful and appreciative. Give yourself some credit for getting to where you got, because otherwise, I think maybe we beat ourselves up too much.
Absolutely. And we should also do things like setting smaller incremental goals instead of looking at just this one massive goal. Because if you look at it like that, then it can be very daunting, right? You can get intimidated by it. But if you set these small goals, and I actually had written a guest article on a running blog a few years back. And I'd done this running program, was a 5K running program, and I don't like jogging. But uh, I mean, the idea of just constantly running was just like, but I was able to complete it. And so the points that I made in the article was that when running, especially for someone who doesn't like it, if you try to think, oh, I've got to run 5 kilometers, right? I've got to run for the next 30 minutes. That's a whole sitcom episode. And you're just going to be running. It's very daunting. But if you're on there jogging and you look and you see a tree 100 yards away and you think in your head, I'm going to make it to that tree. And then you make it there and then you look at the next one. I'm going to make it to that one. So you're having these mini victories along the way, and it's a little bit more manageable in that way. And so if we do the same thing with goals, then
Right.
we'll probably do a little bit better.
Would they say
You know,
the journey of 1,000,000 miles starts with the first step or something like that?
Yeah.
I like it and all that, but I gotta say, like, when I start running, it's more, I start thinking like, all right, now my knees hurt, now my legs hurt. I can't think of anything else.
Well, you got to build up to it. You can't just start running. Because that was actually a goal that it's been years now, but I set. And because I remember I would run, I figuring like whatever my fitness level was at that time, and I could run for like 60 seconds and I'd be out of breath. I'm like, this is ridiculous. This makes no sense. And so I'm like, I need to do something about this. And then so my sister put me onto this app, this the couch to C to 5K, couch to 5K. And it was a running program for like an 8 week running program 3 times a week. And you just put the app on and it tells you start running, start walking, start running, start walk, and you just follow it for that 8 weeks. And it was very manageable, very doable, and I was able to do it. And I haven't done it in years, but I got out and did some running this summer after I came back when I had a little bit of that vacation weight. And I was still able to, run really well. So it's doable. So try that. It takes it very slow. So yeah, the knees and all.
So how was your 5K? Like how was your pace?
I think when I clocked the last one, it was about 33 or 34 minutes. So it wasn't very fast, but yeah.
What, like around 12 minute mile? My
Um,
math is a little.
I don't know what that works out as mile wise, but it wasn't, yeah, like I said, I wasn't running for speed. I was running for distance.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think it was about a 33, 34 minute, and my sister and my mother make fun of me because I did it in in flip-flops. So
Really?
that was, yeah, I did oh, sorry, 32 minutes, 53 seconds. So it was about
Yeah,
a
that's
six.
that's really good pace.
So
In flip-flops?
yeah,
Goodness.
there we go. I don't know if you
Yeah, I
can see
heard
it.
it's actually better just to run in
Well,
like either barefoot or like,
That's
something close
hardcore
to it.
though.
right. Well, that's what it was. Like, see, like what you were talking about, your knees and all this and that. Here's the thing
Yeah.
with running, 100% of runners get injuries, and I didn't want to get injuries. And so the more natural running style is that we run barefoot or with minimal protection. A lot of times the shoes and the arches, the fake arches that are in the shoes, can contribute to it, especially the padding in the shoes. And so what the padding in the shoes does, it makes us um, not register the impact, the
Right.
extent of the impact that we're putting onto the ground.
And
And
that's
so,
it. Yeah.
and that's what we're doing. We're overstressing it. And so I wanted to have as little as possible. And I couldn't find any thin shoes here that had that because you have the minimalist shoes, that type of thing. I couldn't find any. So I just put on my flip-flops. I'm like, I remember, when I was young in Hawaii running around, we'd run around, you know what I mean? Like you run like that. So I did that, and all my running since that, I probably put 100 kilometers on those flip-flops
Wow.
by now. So yeah. And no injuries, and it was all good. No, so
All right. So my New Year's resolution is
uh-oh.
to come up with a better way of answering the question, what kind of law do you practice? Or what kind of cases do you do?
Mm,
Because I've said for a while now, election law and civil litigation, right? But I
mm,
find that the civil litigation part confuses a lot of people, and they'll assume that I'm doing divorces or personal injury. They'll start asking me about workers' comp and things like that. But I tend to do, and I do a wide variety of cases, but I tend not to do those types of cases, really. I don't really do any cases on contingency. I do cases normally about, and see, here's the thing, I want to have a quick way of saying without having to go into a whole big explanation, right? But just to kind of set this up, cases where maybe people have an issue with the city, something that's going to affect a lot of people, not necessarily just one person, right? Because maybe the city is doing something wrong and you might have one plaintiff or a small group of plaintiffs. But if you have a successful action, right, if you win your lawsuit, that's going to change the city's policy on something.
Right.
I've done cases testing the bounds of the First Amendment as it relates to the press. Where does freedom of speech clash with defamation? And again, these are kind of precedent setting cases or testing cases, so what's a good way of describing that? I actually went to ChatGPT and asked them for advice. I mean, these are the kind of cases that I do. They really didn't come up with a good answer because their explanation was very wordy, right? I gave them an example of cases that I did, and it came up with one long sentence. I basically described all the different cases I said. I'm looking for like something simple, like a quick buzz term or something that I can say that'll kind of make people understand without going into too deep of an explanation. So the best I've been able to come up with so far is, I just lost it. So you're shaking your head and I'm losing my confidence. I was going to say high impact, not high impact, high profile, right? Most of the cases I do, and I don't want to sound pretentious, but they're more high profile. They're the kind of cases that you might read about in a paper, again, because they have implications beyond just the one client, usually, right? Again, if you're suing the city, right? If, sometimes it's a matter of the city not providing the proper oversight over a housing cooperative. Well, that's going to have wide-reaching implications. And so high profile community cases, I think, best describes most of the work that I've done.
I was just going to say, you could say I do election law and I sue the city.
But it isn't always suing the city, though. It isn't always that. That's a common example of it, right? But sometimes, for example, it could be against a newspaper. It could, there are different scenarios, but usually it involves more than just that one client. It isn't usually like the client versus their landlord, and whatever happens only affects those parties. Usually it's reaching beyond that. Not always. I mean, I've done, and that's why I don't want to put myself in that box either. But to kind of describe it as the elevator pitch for people, what kind of cases do you do? Because they ask every lawyer that, right? They ask you that a lot. And I want to have a good, snappy answer where, it just kind of gives them a sense of what I do. Civil litigation is too broad of a term, I think, and I've tried to keep it broad over the years because I do all different types of cases and I want to be able to take all different types of cases. I don't want to box myself out. But, I've known, especially, I guess, as time has gone on, I've been able to refine that description a little bit more, right? Because I have years of experience. Like I say, okay, over these past 10 years, this is mostly what I've done. And it mostly in that type of case, because you develop a reputation in that area and people keep calling you to do those types of cases. So
yeah,
I don't know. I'm workshopping it, I guess, but that's my resolution, to get a good answer. Maybe we'll see in December if it reached its equilibrium. Right?
It's going to take you till December to decide.
Well, I've got to test it out. It's like almost like a stand-up comedian trying out new material. You got to see how it stays in the room, because sometimes you'll give an answer at a cocktail party or an event or whatever, and then you read the reaction and they're either confused or they don't like it, or they say, "Oh, I see." You're like, it didn't work. Like you try to do something that they get it, right?
Right.
Civil litigation.
Okay.
A whole year
I need
case
new
study.
Huh?
A whole year of case study.
Yeah. And in fact, Jay, I did say once that sometimes I sue the city over a project, and they say, "Oh, you're the NIMBY lawyer," meaning not in my backyard. I said, "No, I'm not the guy who's suing the city over any new construction. Like that's not all the cases that I do." I was trying to give one example of something.
Right.
But it is a wide variety of things, so it's hard to narrow it down to just one term. It's not like I can be like, "Well, I just do divorces or I do personal injury." But if I had to try to find that common thread, I like the term high profile.
Well, work with it. Start with that.
Yeah.
What about like community advocate lawyer?
Right. High profile community cases.
He wants the high profile in there. He's
High profile.
he's set on that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but community, that's a good one too.
Yeah.
If I say community law, it's like, well, what is that? So the thing is, there's always going to be a follow-up question. Well, what does that mean? Right?
Well, you're gonna have that anyway, though. I mean,
Well, not necessarily. If I said, if I was a divorce lawyer, there would be no follow-up. I mean, maybe it might be, oh, how's that nowadays? But they know what I'm
yeah,
talking about right away, you know?
right.
I kind of like what Jay said earlier, though. I don't know, something about you does this and then sues the city.
But I don't
Would you
always
say
sue,
that?
Election law in Sioux City, and I
Yeah,
sue the city.
yeah.
but I
Public,
don't
I don't know,
always sue the
public
city,
impact
though.
cases.
It's not always about that,
But
right?
then if you're talking to somebody, they'll understand. Like it's like, okay, like you're that kind
Here's
of.
the thing also, if you just say, oh, I sued the city, what they're gonna think immediately is someone falls into a pothole or something like that, and they're
Oh,
suing
right,
the
right, right, right.
They're not thinking, they're coming in to provide the level of oversight that's needed, or that
Right, right.
no one I don't think is thinking that unless you kind of lead them in that direction.
What if you
But
say,
that's where the election law. That's why
what
you
do you
start
think
off with the
public,
election law.
Election law is about the ballot and sometimes recounts and things like that.
right? What about public impact law?
That's interesting. Public
Mm.
impact. That's still the kind of question I think where it's going to be follow-up. Well, what is that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
So it's difficult, right? I never used to like it. When I first started, I would hate get that question because I think the general public tends to think that lawyers are like doctors and that you have to only do one field, like one type of case. Like if you're a doctor, maybe you're a podiatrist, you work with the feet. They think if you're a lawyer, you just get certified in that area. Like I could only do election law, I can only do criminal law, but that's not how the law works, right? You're a lawyer, you could do all types of cases. It's just more
Well, yeah, but people
have you.
specialize sometimes. You know what you can do?
Yeah,
You
but
have a
here's the
business
thing, in
card.
New York, and it varies by state, but in New York, for instance, you can't even say that you specialize. Lawyers ethically cannot say that they specialize in something unless they're certified by the state in that area. That's very rare. I don't even know if anyone who has that. That's not even really, a big
Well,
thing.
you could. You've got your
Most
business card.
lawyers.
Put it on your business card, and when they say, "Well, what kind of law do you practice?" and be like, "It's on the card," and then just walk away.
I'll tell you what's on the card. Yeah, that's a good point. And
And
actually,
then just walk
might be
away. Be like, "Here, read the card."
if I can find the card. Yeah, here you go. It says attorney/community leader. So the community word is already on there. That's
Right.
what it is. It's it's because that's what happens, right? They
Community
come from
impact,
certain
community
communities.
impact law, or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
So
But I think most lawyers find like a niche and just stick with it, right?
sometimes it doesn't have to be that narrow, though.
Well, that's kind of his niche as
Unless
well.
you're who's the lawyer from The Godfather? Yeah, then you do everything.
That's a niche. Well,
It's kind of a niche, right?
no, but election law is a big thing, but I do things beyond election law, right? So if it's a big election year like this year is supposed to be, I should have several candidates as clients or campaigns as clients, or even, a political consulting firm or two as a client. And that's a big portion of my work, especially during campaign season. But then outside of that, I usually do several, maybe not several, but up to several other cases. And they're usually high profile cases and big community impact cases, as Jay would describe them. And that's a big part of my practice as well. We also started doing wills, and I've got an attorney working for me who is in charge of that side of things. And so that's something that's easy to describe, right? The community impact, high profile, suing the city sometimes suing the newspaper or someone else. That's a little harder to describe. I think in one or two clean words that everyone understands.
Well, you could just, if you say community impact law, or take on cases that affect the community or affect the public. So it doesn't say that you're doing, like you said, specific individuals. It's something that affects,
yeah, like public impact or something like that too.
Yeah.
I got it.
That's a term that you hear about, public interest.
Yeah. Right.
You can say you're like the Tom Hagen, and the people is your one client.
What?
Tom Hagen was the lawyer in Godfather.
he wants to get that.
The people is your client.
He wanted that Godfather reference.
Yeah. What about Better Call Saul? He was doing all kinds of interesting things too.
No, but he was like, he had a niche. It was
like elder law, right?
Yeah. And like accident law or something.
Yeah. But it is funny because even lawyers will ask you what kind of cases to do. I think it's a natural question to ask lawyers, and lawyers probably have a better understanding of it than the public might. But it's always interesting trying to find that good answer that doesn't lead to more confusion, or what's that, or it's funny because if someone is a real estate lawyer, they can just say that and walk away, right? If I answer the question, I'm there for like 5 more minutes trying to explain it. Like I just need a good answer to this question.
Right. All right.
Well, what do you consider your niche though? Like if you had to
Everything I said, election law plus these high impact or high profile public impact community cases. But
That's
it's
kind
civil
of broad.
litigation, it's not criminal. Huh?
That's kind of broad.
Well, it is kind of broad. I do a lot of different things in that general area, though.
Yeah.
But it's
So
civil cases, right? But that,
right.
especially people who aren't lawyers, they get confused when you say civil litigation, or maybe they've heard
Right.
that term before, but they only apply it to what they know, right? So they might think that
Right.
means personal injury or something like that. I don't do any of that.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but anyway, this is something we're going to workshop.
Yeah.
Wait,
Well,
that's it? That's the
try a
only
couple of,
resolution?
Yeah, this is my
you
resolution. Yeah.
you got a couple of you got a couple of things there, so try to work it
I'll
out.
throw out
See.
a few, and I gauge the reactions. I see people's faces. I read the faces, and also the follow-up questions. Right? I want something where they get it, and they're like, "Oh, that's interesting."
Yeah.
So,
So,
yeah,
but
we'll work on that, and maybe the next print of business cards will contain this new phrase that we've worked out.
there we go. There we
All right. So
go.
the poll question of the week. Let's put it out there to the people to see if they still have New Year's resolutions. Right? Do you guys set a New Year's resolution or more every year, or do you just kind of set goals for yourself throughout the year? I know it's a big joke in society, right? How people set a resolution and then they drop them a couple of weeks in, right? I'm gonna work out every day, and then by week 3, not going to the gym anymore, and that kind of thing. So let's see, do people still do it? Do our listeners and our viewers? Do you guys have resolutions? So the poll question of the week is: do you still set New Year's resolutions for yourself?
Yeah, we'll see what people have to
And you should
say.
throw in there like any suggestions they have. They should, throw it in there. I might get a
Suggestions for resolutions for you?
yeah. So yeah.
Other people?
Yeah. I'm still thinking about mine.
Mm,
Well, maybe in
yeah.
the comments, people will say what their resolutions are, and then we can draw inspiration.
Mm.
That's what's up. That's what's
So
up.
speaking of polls, we had a poll last week.
We did have a poll last week. And our poll last week was in relation to the bill that's been moved and voted on in New York about solitary confinement.
Right.
So the question was, do you agree with the New York City Council bill that would ban most forms of solitary confinement? So the bill went through where they were changing the way solitary worked. People had to be guaranteed at least 14 hours of out of cell time. And of course, solitary confinement can have all sorts of psychological issues, and it can also be applied disproportionately to different individuals. Black and brown people are more likely to be put in solitary confinement. So, plus, there's also the question of it being inhumane. So, this poll came out, and so we had 69% said yes, they agreed with the bill to ban most forms of solitary confinement. 23% said no, and 8% said not sure.
Okay.
There weren't a lot of comments this time around, but the ones that were on there were all on board with banning most forms of solitary confinement. What do you think, Isaac?
You put me on the spot. On the spot there.
Well, yeah.
Banning solitary confinement.
Yeah, so the New York City Council passed legislation that would ban most forms of solitary confinement in New York.
Right.
What are they replacing it with?
Well, for one thing, they want to add due process to it. So they don't want to just put someone in the hole, as they say. They want to have a hearing and give the person a chance to essentially defend themselves and explain their side, and then come up with a judgment, so to speak, as to whether they should be given that form of punishment. And they also want to limit that punishment's use, right, broadly, right? And so as of now, they can just kind of throw someone in the hole. They won't want to be doing that as much, and so it's much shorter periods and with this due process component.
Well,
Right. And
I'm not too familiar with jail, but I think if someone's going to like solitary confinement, that means like, they did something severe and they need to be isolated and whatnot, right?
Well,
Allegedly and generally, yes, that's the idea behind it. Yeah.
that's the idea behind it, but it's
Right.
not necessarily how it's being implemented. And I think even in this case, the they'd still retain the possibility to use solitary confinement for these very egregious cases, which I think is probably the original intent anyway. But now it's probably being used a little bit more than it should be, and for much more extended periods. And they're starting to understand the effects that it has on people.
Right.
So,
We talked about that last week. It might be even counterproductive.
right,
Certainly if your goal is rehabilitation, but I know we've
right.
had this discussion on Nuance before where society, especially in the US, largely abandoned the goal of rehabilitation, right? So
They
what
move
they're
towards punishment.
right towards retribution. So what they're doing in the criminal justice system doesn't really, it's not even really designed to
Right.
meet the goal of rehabilitation. And that's a problem. So I think people
Problem.
still think of, I don't know, maybe I'm being optimistic, but I think broadly people think of jail and prison as a way for people to get rehabilitated, or at least that they should be when they come out. I think they want them to come out rehabilitated, even if they don't know what goes on the inside. I think they think, okay, when someone is released back into society, they should be better somehow. But by
Well, you
doing
would
things that
hope.
are going to further traumatize them, you're not making them better.
Right. So Isaac still didn't give his
Well,
point of view.
I'm just I don't see what they're replacing it with. I just think there's like you just can't take something away and then just to take it away.
Well,
I
That's the
think there's a
same
reason
argument.
why it was
That's the
created
same
in the first
argument.
place.
That's the
I mean,
same argument
obviously it
that
could
the
be
Southern.
better.
you just said
Um,
slavery, Jay?
Yeah, it's the same argument the Southern plantation owners said. You can't just take slavery away without replacing it with something better. You take away something if it's wrong, regardless of
oh,
what
because
if
it's
there's
wrong. No, but the system is, isn't it like if you're in jail, you do something bad. What's the other option? Like the
well, no,
other
they're
option
still in prison. They're still in
solitary
prison.
confinement. Huh?
Yeah, they're still in prison. They're not gonna like let them go. They're still in prison. It's just in prison for things they do inside the prison. They put them in
Right.
the solitary confinement. They're taking away. They want to ban most forms
I
of.
yeah, I get where Isaac is going because he's saying, all right, they're in prison, and now basically you have this society of sorts within the
Right.
prison. What happens if someone in the prison is bad or worse, if you want to call it that, than the other
Yeah.
prison, right? They're
And then
acting
what do you do?
within
Yeah.
the confines of the prison.
Yeah.
And is there any way to regulate that, or is it just going to be a free for all, and you can just start going wild in there because you're already in prison? So I understand what he means by that, but here's something else. And I don't know if this is really always going to be effective. You could still charge someone with another crime, even if they're
Yeah.
already locked up, and that could add on to their sentence, right? It could
Right.
do certain
But
things.
then now it's like longer sentences. Everything you do, like they just added, more
Right.
sentences.
You're
But they
right. And
do this
also, if
anyway.
someone has life, they don't care, right? You can add on down
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. But then, I mean, they still would have things like lockdowns where they have to be in their cell. It's just the thing with solitary is you're cutting off all kind of sensory input, physical contact, human contact, and psychologically that can be very damaging on people. No air, no fresh air, I mean,
Right. And there's an argument that it's cruel and unusual punishment in violation of the
right,
Constitution. Now, here's
right. We're supposed to have protection against that.
right. What's funny? When I was working in the Senate, they actually had. I posted it on my social media too back in 2016. You guys can check if you want to scroll back that far. But maybe you can just search and it'll come up. In Albany, they had a mock cell that they wanted legislators and staff and just people who were working in the Capitol to go in there and experience what it's like. Now, people wouldn't be in there for too long, but you can go in there and lock yourself up in that for an hour or something like that, just to see what it's like to be in solitary confinement, to
I
get
think
a
it's good.
taste of it,
No, I think it's good. I think anybody that's making these decisions should have that experience so that they know what it is that they're actually um, putting on people. I
Yeah.
think it sounds good to me.
Yeah, no, I thought that was striking to see, right? You're going back and forth,
Yeah.
walking between your office and the Capitol, getting ready to do the votes, and here it is, boom, a big cell with information on what it's about. And it's like, whoa, it does. Even if you don't go in it and lock yourself in there, it does send a message, right? Like, here's a solitary cell. This is what it's like. This is, and like you said, it's like bringing some reality, a dose of reality to the work, right? Because it is true that when you're doing the work, these ideas can become very abstract when you're in the
Right.
legislature, right? You're writing these bills or negotiating these bills. Should we have more solitary confinement? Whatever. It doesn't touch you when it just becomes
Right.
a job at a certain point. You're going back and forth from the office to the floor and you're voting, you're negotiating, you have these agendas, you're trying to get people on your side, but it's not real, it's not tangible unless it's made tangible, you know?
And that's what I think is part of the issue. Now we've talked about it a number of times where I think people in those positions, especially elective officials and police, should be held to a higher standard because it's not just a job; it's a responsibility, and people need to take it in that way. And like you said, it becomes routine, and so it's like think about like when you first start learning to drive, right? Right? That when you first learn to drive, you first get your license, you're on like 10 and 2, and you're sitting up straight
You
and
just don't
you're
talk about
looking
the
around,
grievance and the
you're
feet.
doing all that. And then yeah, then like about a month later, 2 months later, like you got a burrito on one hand, you're steering with your knee, you're like on your phone. So you start to lose, it becomes routine at that point. And in those positions, I don't think it should become routine, and any kind of reminder should be helpful.
All right, so let me give you guys a similar example. So I think um, with kids, they were saying detention is bad. So they kind of, got rid of the whole detention
What?
system. But now what they're doing is they take away recess from the kids.
Recess.
Yes, yeah. So if you're bad, instead of detention, you don't get to go out for recess.
Well, where
What
do
do you
you?
guys think of that?
It sounds like it's still detention. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, where do you go? What do you do when people are at
Well,
recess?
which one's worse?
It's the same thing.
Well,
I think
detention is
that's
you're just sitting, like sitting in a room or the office or whatever.
and
Whereas
where
like
the kid,
if your recess taken away, you're like just in the classroom basically,
right, in the classroom alone, away from everyone. And
or
it's
with like other bad people.
yeah, it's detention. That's to me, that's just like eh, was it moving around pieces in the same area. It's like you're not doing anything different. It's just somebody felt a little touchy-feely and kumbaya and like, oh, we want to take away the tension and do something like it's the same thing.
Well, I mean that's kind of a similar situation though with the whole taking away the solitary confinement because I'm sure
I
something
don't
else will come which would be pretty similar, similar
well,
effect basically.
I don't think so because solitary confinement has very real psychological consequences, and it taking away detention or having detention doesn't have to have that. Like it's not
And to
really
be
this.
honest, I think it's not it's the same or even worse because I mean you're taking away, recess is like the time for a child to kind of go out and kind of let out all the, energy out. But now you're saying, if they're bad, if they have all this energy they just
Oh,
can't control.
no,
Now they
I
can't even
agree.
let it
I
out.
agree that can be psychologically
Yeah.
damaging as well, but I wouldn't compare it to solitary confinement, what that does.
No.
I think that's a different level entirely. But
Oh,
I hear what
yeah,
you're
yeah.
saying about it could maybe hurt a child's development, right? A little bit.
I don't know if
Yeah.
it hurt their development. They would probably feel a little bit. They feel some kind of way that day, but I mean, ultimately,
Oh, but hold on a
recess
second.
is
If you're not
over.
giving
Right,
them
recess is over in like another 45 minutes, and then everything is
not giving
back.
them fresh air though, you're not letting them get a break, a breather, you're posing some other kind of penalty, maybe you're making them study longer, whatever it is, but you're not giving them that break. What if then it affects their performance in the classes for the rest of the day and they fall behind their classes and it can
Nah,
be a
I don't
lasting
buy
effect.
that. I don't buy
I agree, it's not on the same level. But
Yeah, I don't.
really quick though, because I don't want to go too long here, but I do want to get Isaac your thought on the due process component of this because the mayor
Hmm.
says something controversial about this, in my estimation at least. I think it should be controversial if it isn't. But he said that basically we shouldn't care about the due process aspect because the people that we're talking about are inmates. And so he said that look, people who commit assaults in jail or in prison, it's inmates, people who are already convicted of crimes, assaulting other people, who themselves were convicted of crimes, and so we shouldn't care about it. He said you just put them in solitary, do what you got to do, but we don't need to give them due process because it's inmate on inmate crime essentially. That's how I read his statement. What do you think about
Right.
that?
So that I don't agree with. That one, yeah, I do not
Right.
agree with that. Yeah. So I think, I mean, you shouldn't just treat them as animals because,
Right.
Right.
they're in jail. Yeah, that's
Okay.
ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah, that
Yeah, I
was,
mean,
yeah, that kind of, I don't want to say it triggered me, but I read that statement, that quote that he gave, and I was like,
triggered.
yeah, I didn't like that. I just didn't like it.
Kind of rubbed you the wrong way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It's not something that you want to. It's not a. It's not something you want to hear from an elected official, right? You don't want that sort of mentality by someone who's making these critical decisions for humans.
I don't
Like,
want anyone to say that, right? Like, it basically, it shouldn't matter. Why are you trying to protect these people? His point was that the victims in this are themselves criminals, and so who cares?
right?
That's what he was saying.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
And as you know what, as a lawyer, that offends me too, because we still do have rights, and I know
Right.
constitutional rights are restricted, right, in that circumstance, right? When someone
Right.
has been convicted, of course, they don't retain all of their rights as if they were on the outside. No, they lose their freedom, they lose a lot, but
Yeah.
you don't throw out the entire Constitution either. And so I think you have to be sensitive of these things.
Right. Yeah.
So, all right, I want to move on. We're not going to get to everything because we went long, which is fine. We had some good discussions here. I do want to talk briefly about the brief that was filed. This is a follow up from the last discussion we had about whether Trump can be on the ballot. We know that courts, and in at least one case, the Secretary of State of the state decided that he should not be on the ballot due to his violation of, well, I don't know if violation is the correct term, but due to his engaging in insurrection, right? The 14th Amendment has a provision in it saying that if you engaged in insurrection after having previously taken an oath of office to the US, you cannot be a candidate, or you cannot serve as, and it lists offices that you can't serve as, and it also has this catch-all provision, any office under the US. And so that has been interpreted now by a few different states as Trump cannot be on the ballot for president, right? That has been appealed, as we knew it would. Trump has appealed it. What's interesting about this is we talked about last week how this might be decided. When this goes to the Supreme Court, what reasoning might they use? How might they rule on this? Not simply the result, because I think we all kind of agree that the result would be he could be on the ballot, but how would they get to that conclusion, and what analysis would they use? So according to this brief that Trump's lawyers filed, it's really fascinating to me. How much time do you think he spent on whether he's an insurrectionist versus how much time do you think he spent on the procedural part and the technical part?
The lawyer?
Yeah, in the brief. Trump's lawyer in their brief to the Supreme Court, in their legal argument to the court. Because there are two parts to this, right? We said that the 14th Amendment says if you engage in insurrection, then you're disqualified from holding these offices. And so one part of it is, well, did he engage in insurrection? And the other part of it is, well, does president count under these offices? And then the technical parts as to basically whether he did the insurrection or not, should he still be disqualified? So you can kind of cut it in half. How much time do you think they spent on the insurrection part versus the other parts?
If it were Trump making the argument, I would think that he would spend more time on questioning whether or not he did the insurrection or not.
Okay.
So if he was directing the legal team on the route to go, I would think that's the route that he would go. He wouldn't try to go, because he wouldn't try to go the technical argument, because that wouldn't come to him. He would go with, well, did I really commit insurrection, or was it,
It's
like that's
that's actually a very good point. It's like the comedians you see, because as a lawyer, I pick up on this. Oftentimes, you'll see comedians talk about, oh, they did that shit, they didn't do that shit, and they kind of reduce a whole trial or court case to whether they did it or not, disregarding the entire law, and about, well, it's still a burden that needs to be reached, and were they satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt, and they disregard all that. They did that shit. That's always the right. The crux of it. And so you're saying that's basically what Trump would reduce it to. He wouldn't even look at the constitutional provisions or the law or the procedure or any of that stuff.
He doesn't know those things.
I didn't do that shit, right?
He doesn't even know those things.
Right.
And he would, that's exactly how he would go, because he would still the thing is, he'd still be trying to make a justification to why he's right, no matter what it is.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter what the law and the procedures and any of that, because that's technical things. It's about
Right.
whether or not I am right, and that's that's all that he thinks about. And in his mind, he's right no matter what. And he'll make up arguments or reasons why that's the case. Well, I couldn't have participated in insurrection. I was the president, so nothing applies to me. So I can do whatever.
Right.
He'll make up any kind of thing. Or what? I didn't tell them to specifically do that just because I might have tweeted some
Yeah.
support. I didn't. So do you know, did you see me press the button to do that? Maybe it was a hack. Like that's how he would go with
I
it.
keep in mind though that he is not directing the legal argument. His lawyers are doing that.
But
And,
keep in mind that many lawyers have left his legal
right.
defense because of
Right.
having to deal with him.
Right.
And so I think he's got more hands in the case than he probably should, because
Hmm.
if you left it to the lawyers, they'd probably make a better argument
Hmm.
than without his input than they would with his input.
But remember when we acted out that indictment on here and he was asking the lawyer, he was like, what would happen if we just ignored their subpoenas altogether? Or what if we moved the
Right.
boxes? He was just asking them, like, what if? So,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
I
What do you
think,
think, Isaac?
yeah, go ahead. Well, Isaac kind of knows already the answer to this.
Oh, okay.
I was discussing with him earlier, but what are your general thoughts on this? Do you have any?
Are you just not going to say anything, Isaac? Isaac tries
Wait,
not
what,
to
me?
take a position. He tries not
No,
to take a
you already told me, so
position.
I can't. I feel like if I answer.
All right, so I guess we cut to the chase here. This, I think, is going to basically tell us what the Supreme Court is going to do in terms of what they're going to be focusing on in their decision, right? Because the Trump brief is broken down into, of course, whether he's an insurrectionist and also whether he should be on the ballot, regardless of whether he's an insurrectionist. The section devoted to whether he's an insurrectionist is one sentence.
Mm.
And the sentence is, I did not engage in insurrection. That's it. The entire brief, aside from that sentence, is about basically it doesn't matter whether he's an insurrectionist or not. He should still be on the ballot because of these reasons. Partly ones that we discussed already on here, right? The president doesn't count under their view as an office under the US. And they said, it's the same kind of points how we discussed. Other courts also have touched on this, that the amendment talks about presidential electors, vice presidential electors, senators, congressmen. It doesn't say president on there. And they're saying it should.
Right.
If that was the intent for president to be barred, it would have been in there. So that's part of it. There's also a point that the states can't make this decision. They're saying that Congress would have to actually enact legislation setting the parameters of this, enacting it. What are the terms of the amendment?
Right.
I don't buy that argument because it's still federal law. It's the amendment, and states
Right.
have to rule and act in accordance with the federal law, especially in accordance with the Constitution. And so, if the state determines that he engaged in this behavior that would disqualify someone from office under the amendment, my interpretation, understanding of that is that he would be barred from the office. Of course, the Supreme Court would have the last word on it, but I personally don't favor the argument that it only counts if Congress passes a law specifically to enforce it. I think if in the absence of such a law, the states are free to interpret the amendment as it's written. So
Right.
that's what the brief is, right? The brief is not arguing for pages and pages or even paragraphs about whether he's an insurrectionist or not. One sentence, nope, not an insurrectionist, which maybe is kind of on point with what you were saying, right? Because he just thinks he's above the law, and so he's going to have to explain himself. His explanation is, nope, I didn't do it. I ain't, nope, sorry, nope, and that's it. No explanation needed, right? But the lawyers then come in and they really argue this point on the procedure and on the
Right.
You might call the technical points of it, right? The finer points of whether the amendment and the law as it currently stands would allow the states to bar him from running, whether or not he's an insurrectionist. And so I say all this to say, given what the brief is, I think it's highly likely. I think this is a very strong signal to everyone that that's how the decision is going to be. It's not going to be about whether he's an insurrectionist. It's going to be about whether the amendment bars him from running or not as it stands.
Right. And I think that's something that's going to um I mean, for him, it's a better argument than to try to go the other route. And probably he's actually finally listening to the lawyers that remain.
Yeah. Yeah.
But because it kind of puts it in kind of a quagmire of different interpretations,
Hmm.
right? Whereas the other route, there's just so much blatant documented evidence that he participated, from his
Right.
tweet, from
Not to
his
mention,
from the voicemails, from
right, and then it litigates all that very publicly again. Like it keeps it
right,
in the forefront and makes it bubble up more to the surface and comes out more, and it
right,
creates more discussion around that. They don't
right.
want the discussion to be about that.
No,
They want it to be
no,
about these kind of more obscure legal points that are going to go over most people's heads, right? Even for
right,
myself, as someone who studies the Constitution, is really into constitutional law, it's still kind of confusing and obscure. And quite honestly, there's not a lot of precedent on this, right?
right.
So the Supreme Court is kind of free to do what they wish with it, and I think
And the
kind of where
problem,
this is headed.
I think that the biggest problem of this is that you just mentioned precedent. The
Yeah,
precedent that this is going to set,
right,
if he gets put back on the
right,
ballot,
right,
for being able to cause insurrection, and for there not to be any sort of accountability or
right,
any sort of recourse,
right,
that is going to be one of the more dangerous points of this.
right. Because if this goes the way we foresee it going, the decision is going to be essentially it doesn't matter whether you did insurrection or not. You
Right,
cannot be barred from the office of president under the Constitution as it stands, meaning anyone could, in theory, engage in insurrection and not be barred from the office.
right. And that is incredibly dangerous,
Right, right,
because that means someone who's had the mindset of insurrection or overthrowing the government or whatever it is, has the potential to take the highest office in the land. That's quite dangerous.
yeah, yeah. Well, the voters should get the last say on this. If he is restored to the ballot, hopefully the voters will be that final line of defense and have the last word, the bottom line on this. For tonight's episode, see the segue here. Isaac,
Uh-oh.
review the bottom line. So, what would you like to wrap up? It doesn't have to be what we discussed. What is the bottom line on this first nuance of 2024?
Um, no, it's been great. I haven't done this in a while. Like it's great, like having these kind of conversations. And I definitely think, a conversation like this should be had, in a civil manner, and people's opinions should matter. It shouldn't just be like a one mind thing track.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, in 2024, that should be like most people's goals to kind of have opinions and express themselves.
Okay. Okay, I like that. So there you go. Some resolutions. Maybe you figured out what your resolution might be. I don't know.
Yeah, to have more
I'm
civil,
already doing that.
have more civil and nuanced conversations.
Right, right, right. Express your
So,
opinions and give space for others to express theirs, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
have these
right.
conversations. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And Jay,
No,
where can
that's
people find us?
they can find us all over. Find us on YouTube and Instagram at Nuance Show, and drop in, watch, listen, leave some comments, hateful comments or supportive comments, doesn't matter. Anywhere podcasts are, Apple Music, Spotify, wherever your favorite podcast thing is at. So yeah, come in, check us out, subscribe, and all that.
Yes. Thank you all. As always, we've got work to do, and we will catch you next time. Have a good night.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.